Welcome back to IGN's History of Awesome, a year-by-year breakdown of big events that shape pop culture. 2008 was the year of the superhero movie with the release of Iron Man and The Dark Knight, and it was also the year of amazing game sequels as GTA 4, Fallout 3, and Metal Gear Solid 4 all hit consoles. So let's put a smile on that face as we look back at the year 2008.
Welcome everybody to another edition of History of Awesome. For the year 2008, we're taking a look at the year in pop culture, whether that's video games, movies, TV, comic books. Gentlemen, we've got a lot to get to, and I want to start with my favorite thing of 2008. And there turns out there were a lot.
Yeah, that's a great year.
But I have to start with the Batman, The Dark Knight specifically. What is still, I loved it at the time, and the honeymoon never ended for me. It's actually still my favorite movie.
That's
I love this movie.
Rare fraternity of motion pictures where the sequel is better than the original, and the original was excellent. Batman Begins is an awesome movie, and The Dark Knight improves on it in almost every possible way.
Well, it's nice because now you don't have that origin story weight on you. Because like if they're going to say we're going to reboot Batman, that's an hour and a half, 90 minutes of back in time and dealing with him like being like, I'm going to be Batman. But now he's just Batman and it's all good.
Right from the early scene where it's like, okay, we're establishing that Batman's been out for, been on patrol for a year or two, and then we get the guys in the parking garage. And
I'm not wearing hockey pants.
And then he just does that totally baller, just hops off of the ledge
parking garage
and lands on the van. Like, yes.
Yep.
Yes,
they resist the temptation to deliver the super boss. There's no physical opponent who can meet Batman face to face in this movie. Instead, it's somebody who's entirely different than him that comes at him from angles that are more painful than just getting punched in the face. And I really love that about
You are, of course, referring to Heath Ledger's Joker performance, which
absolutely makes the movie, right? I mean, everyone in the movie is really, really good. The cast is great, but it is all about that performance. The thing about Heath Ledger is he absolutely disappears into the role. Actually, this is a weird comparison, but I just rewatched like Tropic Thunder, and you don't see Robert Downey Jr. there. Yeah. And like Heath Ledger, I think you have to look back at like the message boards of people howling and screaming over that casting.
Beforehand, it was like Michael Keaton being cast as Batman in the Tim Burton movie. It was just like, what? Brokeback Mountain guy, like what? We can't do that.
Yeah. And again, Jack Nicholson had kind of inhabited this role in the Burton Batman. He'd become sort of synonymous with it, and so Heath Ledger had to overcome that baggage. And not only overcome it, he knocked it out of the park. I mean, it is one of the great performances in popular culture history. So on top of that, you have Aaron Eckhart, who I think honestly is kind of underrated in this movie. He's really, really good in that wonderful scene with him and the Joker.
In the
hospital. Now we're talking. Had you? Oh, so good.
Yeah. So of course, Ledger did win posthumously. He passed away, of course, after the filming had been completed, but before the movie had come out. So he tragically passed away. He did win the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, completely deservingly so. It's a shame he wasn't alive to accept it himself. His wife, Michelle Williams, accepted it on his behalf. The movie grossed $1 billion worldwide.
It's a lot of bat bucks.
The 24th highest grossing movie ever when adjusted for inflation. And I seem to recall at the time it was like very closely pacing behind Titanic. Like for a while it was on a trajectory.
They were thinking that it was going to be like the next big thing.
As I recall, you couldn't buy a ticket to see it for at least the first week or two. Like it was that hard.
Yeah, like unless you had bought them well in advance, you were kind of SOL.
Fun fact about this movie, you know the handy cam scenes where the Joker is intimidating.
Yeah, like Anthony Michael Hall and all those.
So Heath Ledger directed those himself.
I did not know that.
By directed, do you mean he took Anthony Michael Hall, hung him upside down in a meat locker, and then went and got a Sony Handycam? And was like, we're going to have some fun.
Yes. Jared, what else do we want to say about this just incredible movie? I mean, besides the fact that it's the best Batman, I don't think there's any argument that it's the best Batman to ever live-action Batman on the screen.
Yeah, it simply knocked it out of the park. This is a psychological movie that somehow manages to come off unpretentious. This is I've never been more impressed by a superhero movie. I think this is kind of the gold standard that everybody still shoots for. handles action in a way that seems realistic. It's not, but it kind of feels grounded. It fools you. This movie's very good at fooling you. It's very good at subverting expectations. There's no real kind of epic final battle. It sort of comes down. Ultimately, the heroes of the movie are the population of Gotham, the spirit that Batman believes in. It's just a wonderful conceit, and they pull it off. It's just about the perfect movie.
I love, my favorite thing about The Dark Knight is that I think Christopher Nolan, this is paraphrasing, but his quote is that he wanted Joker to just be a force of nature.
Yeah.
And they don't get bogged down in an origin story. It's not, here's where this guy comes from, and here's where, like, he just shows up like a
custom suit, no labels.
Yeah.
Just to ruin Batman's day. And then they don't waste, that's part of the genius of that movie, is that this, this is hot on the heels of movies like, Spider-Man and other movies where they spend, 20, 30, 40 minutes explaining where these dudes come from. It's like, you don't need that. Like, just let them come in and be a force of nature.
It's that whole thing where he's like, look what I did with a few drums of gasoline and a couple of guns. And it's like, gas is cheap, and that's really all I need.
And what was extra great about that performance and just everything about the Joker in that movie is, remember the glee that you freaked out with at the end of Batman Begins when the Joker was teased? Like, we're getting the Joker the next movie.
I was super worried about that, actually. I saw that, and I was like, oh, that's blatant pandering. That's so dumb. And then, like, throughout all of the lead up to it, like when they were in production and like stuff was getting leaked, like I remember a YouTube video of like his tractor trailer. This is like slaughter is the best medicine going by, and I was like, oh my god, this looks actually really cool. And then they ran those really weird like viral marketing.
That's the next thing, the last thing I wanted to bring up.
These huge scavenger hunts, which were super cool. It's like, the Joker's assembling like a team of ragtag criminals. So it's like, we hid a phone and a cake at this bakery. First person there to find it wins a prize, and it turned out to be like tickets to the movie or something. But it was awesome. Because I was living in Boston at the time, and like I'd be walking through the Boston Common, which is this huge open park, and all of a sudden there would just be like a gaggle of like kind of sweaty, heavier dudes, but like with the grease paint and the green hair and then the Glasgow smile on, just being like, hey man, what's so serious? And it was like 50, 100, 200 of them, and it was like, where are you people all going? And it really kind of burned that like, oh man, this could be a new direction for this, and I really like it a lot.
Yeah, just a brilliant, brilliant film. Stay tuned for our next episode where I could do that entire movie by myself, one-man show.
Please do that.
Night, Ryan McCaffrey edition. Shifting gears to the world of video games, Grand Theft Auto 4 was the end of April 2008. Just the first next-gen GTA, no biggie there. This is a series that had exploded on the PlayStation 2, eventually came to Xbox during that same time.
So many pixels.
We got 3 games in the PS2 era, of course, 3, which catapulted the whole thing, Vice City, and then San Andreas, which literally took the scale of it to another level. And here we go on the 360 and the PS3 with Grand Theft Auto 4, which is back in Liberty City, a.k.a. New York City. What do we remember about Grand Theft Auto 4?
I remember lushness. I think it was Tycho from Penny Arcade who said that you could eat off of GTA 3. GTA 3. It was so clean and abstract, because the technology was still the technology was still developing. GTA 4 felt like a city. It felt like a place where people actually lived. It felt much more like an immersive world. It was, I think, actually maybe a little smaller than San Andreas.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, but it was a much richer place to go. And I loved that about it. Exactly. Also, the mechanics were improved in almost every way by the game. A much more serious story that worked. Not all.
To a point.
Yeah, it worked well enough for me.
Well, that's what jumps out at me about it is the maturation of this franchise, where it's still very much like skewering America. But that's sort of pushed to the background with stuff like the Pisswasser billboards and
the jingle was so good.
It becomes kind of more like when GTA 3 and Vice City were cartoons. That sort of parody aspect of it is sort of pushed to the sideline and lets them tell sort of a serious story about being an immigrant in America. And I thought it worked mostly. I think 5 did an even better job of it in several years, But I'm glad that they had that they chose to, that they had the ambition to try to execute on something like that, and I think they were able to.
Yeah, I think it too, like just seeing, sort of going with the theme of like how ambitious the game it was. I mean, looking at just the scope of that, like the fact that it's, it's not 1-to-1 obviously, but it is almost it's a rough approximation of the entire like Isle of Manhattan, and it's phenomenal. Like I still remember I would play, like not even doing stories or missions, just like driving around in circles, causing chaos through like Times Square and then the Village and then Queens. It was massive.
I'm with you there. I mean, I liked the story, but most of the way I play GTA is wandering around just to get dirty in that world.
Yeah.
And GTA 4 might have done that better than any of them. I still feel like that tight Liberty City was one of the most impressive things Rockstar's ever put together. I really like that aspect of it. So much so that when it was, the secret best thing we ever got out of GTA 4 was they remapped that city for Chinatown Wars, which is my favorite GTA.
Yep.
And it's a one-for-one of the Liberty City seen from the top down. I love that. It was such a good design that it worked even when you completely move the camera to a different place.
I have a vivid memory of just passing the controller back and forth, playing this with my best friend Robert, and we would just go and turn on the in-game TV, and there were these in-game TV shows that were hilarious.
Yeah.
Just unbelievably funny, and then poking around the in-game internet where the cursor was a middle finger, and it was the layers of humor in the game were just, I can't even imagine. They probably had a 10 people just working on that for 3 years.
And speaking of picking it up with your friend, this was also a game that doubled down on multiplayer.
It was the first time we'd ever gotten multiplayer in a Grand Theft Auto game.
Exactly. And really, I think the framework, when they saw people running around years after that game came out, I mean, this is the genesis of GTA Online. This continually supported world. They're like, wow, if people are just going to keep playing, what if we just kept building more stuff onto it? I mean, GTA had a rough start, to say the least, but it has become something unprecedented.
I mean, it's almost its own game at this point.
Well, we covered it in our 2013 episode, but yeah, you mentioned. You guys remember back when Major Nelson used to publish a weekly list of the most played games on Xbox Live.
Yeah.
GTA 4 was at or near the top of that list for, I think, at least 3 or 4 years after the game came out. I mean, and people weren't even necessarily playing the multiplayer modes. Just the free roam, you guys were talking about, just
screwing around,
messing around and causing chaos with your friends was just unbelievable. This game made $310 million in revenue in its first day, which we'll talk about GTA 5 decimating that later, but $500 million in its first week, $500 million. It had been delayed, as you guys might remember, from fall of 2007.
Oh, yeah.
It was supposed to come out in October of 2007. Did not. It was not ready. And then the other fun thing about this for me is, fun fact, which I remember, but I bet a lot of the younger viewers do not, is the game engine that this was built on, Rage, Rockstar Advanced Game Engine. It was sort of purpose-built for what would ultimately be all of the Rockstar games, but it was really intended for Grand Theft Auto first. Rockstar released a game before this, about a year before this, literally as a test of the engine. You may remember it. It was called Rockstar Table Tennis.
It was
which was pretty good.
I like table tennis. Just the other day, I found the Wii version of table tennis for 99 cents and picked it up. Rockstar Table Tennis. Rockstar Table Tennis was ported to the Wii, and I found a used copy for $1. I didn't know that either.
See, it's funny because when I had been out of the gaming news loop for a long time, and when somebody said to me like, "Hey man, the new GTA is out like today," I was like, "What?" I ran back to my apartment, hopped on Craigslist, willing to trade Nintendo Wii 5 games for a 360.
Yeah.
And like the next day, somebody showed up. Like it was the sketchiest thing on earth.
Took the kidney and left you in a bathtub.
He gave me an Xbox out the trunk of his car. I gave him a Wii and like Twilight Princess or some Zelda game and like
it was a good deal for you.
And then I immediately went down to the GameStop down the street and was like, "Give me GTA 4 right now."
Yeah,
it's awesome. Yeah,
absolutely solid game. Chinatown Wars, play it, kids.
Slipping that in there, I like
Absolutely.
that.
Really, really love them Chinatown.
Oh, this game's great. It's built on that Liberty City that was designed for 4.
So 2008 was a really good year for video games beyond the just meteoric impact of Grand Theft Auto 4. We also got Fallout 3, which has quite a story unto itself.
Yeah.
I mean, we know, of course, Fallout 4 is a very recent release as we record this, and it's been huge, but
almost a
Fallout
decade later.
3, Fallout 3 was a long time coming.
Yeah.
Like decades.
Yeah, I mean, it brought that franchise back from the dead. You know, Bethesda bought the rights to Fallout, and I guess I kind of have to, I'm trying to remember back, were people skeptical or optimistic? You know, Bethesda was already making massive Elder Scrolls games, so I think people probably believed in them, but there were big questions about it's going to be turn-based, it's going to be real-time, and the decision to go with, you know, well, it's kind of both. It's kind of either you can pause in vats and, you know, target body parts, or you can play it run and gun. I don't know. They really delivered, I think.
And those mechanics seem anachronistic now, but when they were first introduced, they were revolutionary. They've been refined since then, but it was still just a superb synergy of two different ideas that worked much better than it had any business working, especially on their first real try with it. I mean, it was wonderful. I was a big fan of the Elder Scrolls games, and I was excited when I heard about this, but then, it just took a long time to happen, and you started to wonder, is this going to work? Is this going to work? And man, did it ever work.
Yeah, Justin, you alluded to the fact that the IP had languished for years. It was, of course, a legendary Interplay-owned franchise, their publisher that's no longer around, but Black Isle was a legendary role-playing game studio with so many great names attached to it. And they were the original developers, and then, it just sort of, Interplay went away, and so, Fallout's just sitting around, and I did an interview with Todd Howard years ago at my last job, and I said to him, well, you have, this was sort of in the run-up to Fallout 3, and it said, well, your Elder Scrolls games are huge every time, you must have total carte blanche to do whatever you want at Bethesda, and he said, well, I don't really wield it like a dictator. So I was like, well, what do you do as the guy who can do whatever he wants? And he said he went to the ZeniMax bosses and went, I want Fallout. And they go and get it for him, and then he turns it into another billion-dollar franchise.
Yep.
Well, Fallout 3 was really the proof that we didn't know it at the time, but that studio was going to alternate. They were going to go, and that must be so satisfying for them to dive into a fantasy land, swords and shields and magic, and then bounce back to, sort of weird sci-fi, occasionally aliens and guns and mutants. Like, that's just this perfect balance between, you're going to get, a fantastic, huge AAA Elder Scrolls or Fallout game.
And it keeps, not only does it keep the audience, it turns them both into big events because they don't come around too often, and it probably keeps your creative team together more. I'm sure people inevitably come and go, but rather than just burn everybody out on, well, we just finished an Elder Scrolls game, so time to start on our next Elder Scrolls game. Yeah, it's a strategy that's absolutely working wonders for them. Funny fact though about Fallout 3 is if you played it when it first came out, as I did, it originally ended.
Yep.
And then you were just done, and that was it. And then everybody flipped out. And they had to retcon it. And so that you could just keep playing in the
world.
You
can go back outside. It's totally fine.
I mean, not actually the first time that happened in the series. Fallout 1 had a hard time limit built into it. Actually, 2 of them. And they're like, man, no, this is a world that's fun. That's done. And they patched it out later on. It's the same kind of thing. They've done that a couple of times, not realizing just how much fun wandering around and doing dumb stuff would be. That's the point of the game for me.
Fantastic game full of fantastic design decisions and quests. I want to touch on Megaton in a second.
Yes.
But undoubtedly not. This is History of Awesome, but that not such an awesome moment in the history of Fallout 3 in that case, the decision to end the game. But that Megaton quest was, I guess we're going to spoil Fallout 3 for you people.
If you haven't played it.
It's been 8 years.
Yeah.
But that following through on giving player choice to that degree where you can choose to save them or you can nuke that whole town.
And you
pretty
get a
early
sweet
in the
apartment.
game, too.
Yeah, I mean, that's like one of the first or second quests. And if you happen to level up your, was it science skill that would let you tweak the bombs a little bit?
I think so.
If you just put all your points into that, you could just do it right out of the gate.
Yep. Well, and I like how obviously it has far-reaching consequences. NPCs gone, quests gone. You can see this cascade of quest failed, quest failed as like the mushroom cloud goes off. But then some people like Moira are still around to hilarious effect and turned into a ghoul. So it sort of played very seriously, but also played for laughs in some ways. It was undoubtedly one of the best moments in Fallout history.
I mean, it's honestly probably one of the best and biggest choices ever to be given to a player in video games ever.
Certainly one of the most memorable, And I love also, Justin, what you said about played to humorous effect. It's a funny game. That's fairly rare. And Fallout it manages to be gritty and dirty and grimy and
darkly humorous for sure.
Yeah.
610,000 copies sold in its first month, which of course it would, and the legs on it were astounding. It went on to millions of copies, and then Fallout 4 even bigger. So
right, I mean that's actually a good 610. That's a big success, but that's not actually. Fallout's only grown in esteem in the what year was this? 2000 and in the 7, 8, 9 years since then.
Well, and then with the advent of PC modding and like the resale value on Steam and everything. There was no guarantee
that Fallout 3 was going to be.
Oh yeah, no, not at all. And I mean, they're still seeing. I mean, of course, now it costs $7 if you're buying it at a Steam sale, but people will still buy that. Like, I'll get tweets and messages from people who I know are pretty current with their games, but they're like, no, I finally just bought Fallout 3. I'm going to install a bunch of mods.
Still very
play it
playable.
again.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I just went back to it this year before Fallout 4 came out.
Let's stick with video games for just a few more minutes with Metal Gear Solid 4, a game that was obviously also a long time coming, and when it came out, it was a big, big deal.
This is a game that's a testimony to the excess of orgy that Kojima is capable of when you leave him unrestrained. I mean, this is the most insane mainstream video game maybe ever made. It's absolutely ridiculous.
How long are the cutscenes?
Oh, there's some that are 90 minutes long, right? I don't think that's an exaggeration.
No, towards the end of the game, there is one cutscene that I believe clocks in at just under an hour and a half.
Wow.
But it's not just the cutscenes, it's what the cutscenes are about. I mean, this is a game that's got, grotesque humor and dirty jokes and awesome action and incredible stealth sequences and a Mount Rushmore made up of bad guys.
But then they'll spend 25 minutes out of a 45-minute long cutscene giving you a lesson on the human genome and how it works and how they've all been altered in the last 15 to 20 years.
And let's not forget nanomachines.
Nanomachines, son.
Who could forget?
Who can forget the nanomachines? Absolutely. Yeah, it is bizarre. This is the kind of video game that shouldn't exist on this scale, but because the core gameplay is so much fun, and because he had built this kind of legacy of trust / Andy Kaufman-like betrayal with his audience, because you had Metal Gear Solid 1 and 3, which are awesome, and 2, which has great gameplay, but is also one of the great middle fingers in gaming history. You can put all that together, bring that to a pitch meeting at Konami, say, here's 4, and they're going to greenlight it anyway. That can't happen normally, and that's what makes this game so fascinating.
It also has maybe the best ladder in video games. Top 10 ladders in video games.
That's number 3.
Can we make that feature?
Isn't that 3?
Snake Eater ladder is 3.
Oh,
get out! You're off the show. No, this one, Metal Gear Solid 4 has the best tunnel in video games.
Sure, it's got that radiation tunnel.
You're gonna crawl through the radiation tunnel for 20 minutes while you also get a split screen of a cutscene with characters getting married on a battlefield.
There's some weird stuff going on there. And isn't there, if I remember right, a Street Fighter-esque battle on top of a...
Oh yeah, the final fight that lasts you an hour.
Yeah, or
although to be fair, I think it is not necessarily the most fun, but it's one of the best boss battles in my memory, just for all of the nods and winks that it pays to the rest of the series. So because it's, spoilers if you haven't played it, it's between Snake and Liquid Ocelot, who is the re-embodied version of Liquid Snake, but entrapped in the body of Revolver. It doesn't matter. Anyways, as you fight, through the first stages, it echoes every final boss battle from every other Metal Gear game up to that point. You get the health bars and the soundtrack from the end of the first one, and then the second one, and then the third one with the flowers and stuff. You get weird flashes like you would get in Metal Gear Solid 3. It was really amazing, but also way too long.
It was also great that it flashed back. We got to finally revisit characters that we hadn't really gotten to play with in 2 games. Yeah. I mean, since Metal Gear Solid 1, we had not really dealt with that Snake and Otacon, and we just left
Snake and Otacon for about 20 minutes at the beginning of MGS2.
Yeah, and that's it. And the tanker sequence, and then we're done. And then for 2 games, the guys that we associate with the series are gone.
Yeah, but all of a sudden, Raiden's a cyborg now?
Yeah, it's all weird.
No, it's great.
It doesn't make any sense. It's dumb. It's G.I. Joe meets strange, weird Hideo Kojima. Wow, I can't say it.
Hard.
Philosophy meets Japanese pop culture, and somehow it all comes together into just a glorious disaster piece.
Yeah.
Well, let's move to the small screen of television, and maybe a little big screen on film too. In fact, big screen first. Iron Man. This was the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe got kicked off in 2008.
Thanks, John Favreau.
Well, what's interesting, the reason I really enjoy History of Awesome, besides getting to talk to all you lovely people, is you notice things like, I guess I'd never pieced together in my head that Iron Man and Dark Knight were the same year.
Yeah.
And what different divergent takes on the superhero
funny
genre.
Too, because I remember people coming, when they first announced that Iron Man was going to release the same summer, people were like, oh, that's going to fail so hard, that's going to get crushed by Batman.
Yep. That's the other thing I want to really highlight here is that, Iron Man is a top-tier AAA Marvel superhero now.
Yeah.
But he was, anyone that tells you he was before this movie came out, either it's misremembering or just
liked Marvel.
No, I couldn't believe it. I grew up reading Iron Man. Iron Man books. I loved them, but it was something
he was B-tier at best.
Exactly. He was a B-tier hero. He was really only known by anybody because he was an Avenger.
Right.
And so he's part of those books.
I mean, outside of the people who actively were up on comics, aside from the X-Men who had 4 or 5 of their own movies by this time.
Yeah.
Nobody knew any other Marvel characters except for Spider-Man. You had Spider-Man, you had the X-Men, and then literally everybody else.
And I did what I think a lot of people did was, I just went to see a lot of movies. I like superheroes. Sure, I'll go see Iron Man. Didn't really have any expectations, and afterwards I'm like, holy crap.
No, I saw the Robert Downey Jr. casting, and I was like, I'd read the books. Tony Stark is an alcoholic guy whose life almost falls apart based on
but funny.
This kind of the same dude, a funny, snarky, good-looking, rich guy that almost lost it all. They've lived parallel lives. They synergize into this wonderful character. And then I saw that trailer, and I was like, oh, that's awful.
I don't remember the trailer.
The trailer was awful. It used the Black Sabbath song, but it just looks so rote. It just looked like, oh, this is, and it's like they tried to keep the best moments in the movie away.
Yeah, but that's good,
and then went and saw the movie and was like, this is fantastic. Yeah, just fantastic.
And it got its angry Jeff Bridges.
Oh, it does,
which is just phenomenal.
Always good to have.
I'm not going to do the line.
Please don't.
Oh,
really relaunched Robert Downey Jr.'s career and sent him into the stratosphere of A-list movie stars to the point where, word on the street is he now gets like $75 million every time he puts on that Iron Man suit. More.
Just insane.
That's just ridiculous. But did $585 million at the box office worldwide. Personally, the first 2 acts of this movie I think are almost perfect. For me, it falls apart a bit in the 3rd act.
Once the Ironmonger becomes a thing.
Jeff Bridges is this comically oversized suit.
It's kind of junky, but like I was still okay with it.
Well, it does kick off the trend of, besides sort of kicking off the Marvel Cinematic Universe, although it would take a few movies for them to really crystallize what that meant. It also sort of kicks off the trend of Marvel having much better heroes than villains in their movies.
And also kind of having just to save their good villains for other pieces.
We like to see these heroes ham it up and kind of beat up on sort of a scrubby bad guy. And I'm sort of on the fence about whether I'm okay with that or not. But that movie is a tremendous amount of fun. I get a little misty every time Jensen saves helps him escape from the cave. It's very sad.
Aww,
poor Jensen.
And now, how many billions of dollars later is the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Right, like who would have guessed?
Just unbelievable. Small screen, Breaking Bad kicked off in 2008.
Man, this
was such a good year.
Well, what's funny about Breaking Bad...
We got a few more, too.
God. People don't think about Breaking Bad as a 2008 show, but that's another one, sort of like Iron Man or like whatever, that would sort of build up steam as it went along. And that's like pretty early for such a revolutionary show to begin, its incredible run.
Yeah, I mean,
we're in like the golden age of television now, but in the mid 2000s, it's like I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people. I mean, this is definitely just my own personal experience. Like, I didn't really discover Breaking Bad until like 2010, 2011. Once the first couple of seasons were on Netflix, when like Netflix first really pushed streaming. We're like, look at all the great content we have. We've got Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
And then I feel like a lot more people started discovering it and then actively starting to watch it week to week. But I mean, what a phenomenal just idea for a show in general.
I mean, I love that show. I love seeing sort of the slow and steady, sort of excruciating descent that this, good, or maybe he's not, he started off good, but the descent that this man goes on, his personal journey, and they don't really pull any punches, and they don't, they take their time with it, man. They're like, you are really going to see everything.
Yeah, like when you stop and think, like, all 5 seasons take place over the span of, I think, maybe 11 or 12, or like, I think it's like a year and a half.
I guess I don't know how long it is, but not very long.
No, it's less than 2 years worth of time passes between he finds out he has cancer and then end of the show. I don't want to say anything because you haven't seen it.
Yeah. There are very, very few movies or television shows that can successfully allow you to bond with a terrible person. Breaking Bad does that better probably than anything ever has.
The Sopranos.
The Sopranos.
But it's in that same school, right?
And it followed The Sopranos.
But we knew Tony was a terrible person at the start of the episode. Like with Walter White.
To see someone become a terrible person.
Like he's this really nice, mild-mannered guy, and you just see him become this monster by the end of season 4.
I remember my roommate.
See him become the one who knocks.
Yeah, exactly. He's the danger.
My roommate was binging this a few years ago, and I remember I would be sitting in the other room, and I just hear him shouting at the television, "He's in it now! He's in deep! He ain't getting out!" He'd say, "Get quiet," and about an hour later, he's in it now, and that was how it would go over and over again for several seasons of Breaking Bad.
That's pretty much, you just summed up 5 seasons of Breaking Bad. It's like if you were to read the 2-sentence description of every episode of Breaking Bad, it's like things go very poorly for Walter White, but he manages to get out of it. And then it's like it's just 5 seasons of that. And like I love the show to death, but I did stop watching it for a while because I'm like, I just can't.
It makes me too sad.
Yeah, like it's too much. Like I feel like I need to watch an episode of something silly. Like I need to watch the Venture Brothers afterwards or something.
Even
like,
that got pretty heavy eventually.
well, okay, yeah, sure.
What was the show caught people off guard partially because Bryan Cranston was best known for being the dad on Malcolm in the Middle.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Where he was also wonderful.
Oh yeah.
Well, and like the interplay between him and Aaron Paul is just so wonderful and great, and that's something that you can see sort of that, I don't know, that chemistry, that bro chemistry, I guess, or almost antagonistic, like just the two of them as that show goes on. It's wonderful to watch that.
I mean, it's like the 2010 version or the 2008 version of The Odd Couple.
Yeah.
Where it's like
It is.
instead of having to live together in an apartment, it's these two guys. One's an uptight science teacher, the other's a stoner. They have to cook meth
And
together.
you see the flip-flopping between like who's going to have the conscience.
Yeah,
and the rest of it.
exactly.
It's just great.
And constantly subverting your expectations. Just things coming
yeah.
out of left field that don't feel forced all the time. That things just flip and change
Yeah.
suddenly. And I love that when you can't tell what's about to happen, but you also don't feel cheated.
Yeah, you never really feel safe.
Yeah,
Wow. And you learn a lot about minerals.
Yes.
you do.
Speaking of surprises, Cloverfield was one of the biggest cinematic surprises
right there.
we'd had in some time. This was, the Blair Witch was kind of the original viral marketed hit, I'd say, but Cloverfield certainly counts.
It is the most J.J. Abrams thing that ever happened. There's a huge word of mouth, giant build-up, big first act, reaches the apex, and then kind of fizzles at the end. But
I don't
it's
know, man.
good. I like it.
I like all of Cloverfield. I like that trailer though.
Yes.
And I like the movie, but the trailer really is the movie encapsulated, where like it leads you down this way and then jerks you back in a completely different direction.
Yeah.
Just a great. It's like it's hard to make a monster movie in modern times. The new Godzilla is good, but it's just tough. Like that sort of found footage, handheld take on it. It's one of those things that it feels cliche now, and what people maybe don't understand is that it is really the one. You brought up Blair Witch, but it's really the one that started that
Yeah,
cliche.
it's true.
Like that's the reason why maybe it doesn't feel as fresh and new today, is because it was doing something so different.
And they just managed to keep the whole movie under wraps until it came, or the main thrust of the movie until the thing actually came out. It wasn't a huge blockbuster, mega. I mean, it made $170 million, but
But it's also crazy cheap.
$25 million budget.
That's
So
not bad.
that means
Yeah.
J.J. Abrams gets to keep making movies. That's how that works.
Well, they are. They're making the second one's coming out next.
Yeah.
Soon.
Well, they're
Yeah.
doing
In
something
Cloverfield Lane or whatever.
similar with that
It's
one.
gonna be like the
right, where
Twilight
it's
Zone, I think,
They made
where
the
it's-
movie in secret.
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
no one really knows how much the monsters.
All I know is
in
John
it.
Goodman's in it, and I am down to see it.
I'm scared to be locked underground with John Goodman.
Right?
Yeah.
Have you
I kind
guys
of hope he's playing the same character he did on Roseanne.
Have you guys seen Cloverfield lately? Any of you?
No.
No.
So
not since it was
I don't know
out.
if this will be mind blowing for you. It's mind blowing for me that the guy holding the camera HUD, he's TJ. He's in Deadpool and Silicon Valley.
T.J.
Yeah.
Miller.
no way.
Yeah,
Oh,
TJ Miller. Is that
That's
right?
awesome.
That is awesome.
So just one of those weird, like you're like, oh.
Well, again, it subverts a lot of expectations. You figure out it's a giant monster movie, but then you have things dropping off the bottom. You're like, oh my gosh, they can come down the corridors too, and then people start changing, and it's so great. I love it.
Let's wrap up with another forgotten fact from 2008. There was an optical format war
Yeah.
that resolved itself, that roared and then resolved itself pretty quietly in 2008. The Blu-ray won.
The format war, not awesome. The fact that we finally had
What
a
was
standard.
the HD DVD?
HD
Was that it?
DVD?
Yeah,
Otherwise
that
known as the Xbox 360 disc recalibrator, which is all it was good for about 6 months later.
Yep.
That was a hard time.
What do you think? Like, it was a vicious format war for a long time. You would
Yeah.
go into a store like Target and have a big Blu-ray section and a big
Yep.
HD DVD section.
Which was red, like red
Yep.
versus blue.
Yep.
And even though Blu-ray won, there were millions and millions of HD DVDs sold, and like I wonder, like where are they? Like
Yeah.
are those just
I'll tell
sadly
you,
sitting
there is
on
one
someone's...
sitting in my parents' house somewhere because I made the choice and I chose wrongly.
Oh, that's very sad.
I know. I
The-
felt real bad afterwards.
The external 360 player is sitting in the cabinet over in the lobby. You can still go spot one over there. But I think format wars are frightening. I remember the VHS and beta thing, and I didn't think Sony was going to pull this off because Sony's proprietary formats, most of the time, they get so wrapped up in expense. I mean, this was part of the reason the PS3 was so expensive for a while, was they insisted it's got to have Blu-ray. It's got to have Blu-ray. People are going to want Blu-ray, you know.
And it turned out to be a brilliant business decision.
It worked. It did work. I think they might have pushed that a little too hard, but they won the format, and now they're making money on it.
Well, and now it's a gorgeous, you know, well, it's been interesting to see it's kind of not mattered since everybody just streams everything now.
Yeah. And we kind of all sort of could see that at the time. Like, this isn't going to be a generational thing the way that, you know, DVD or VHS versus Betamax was. But, yeah, I mean, because, of course, it always came down to money, and you had certain studios that were in, like Microsoft, and I believe Toshiba, some other sort of hardware manufacturers, and a couple studios were invested in HD, but then you had Sony and some other folks on the Blu-ray side. Blu-ray is technically the superior format in the sense of it was a 50 gig capacity per disc, and I believe, if memory serves, it was 35 gigabytes for HD, so you kind of had that playing into it, and it's just it almost became a war of attrition.
Yeah, I thought Sony was going to lose when I heard the adult entertainment industry came out behind HD DVD. I thought that would decide it. But again, streaming changed that marketplace as well, and that was less important. I also think that it's good that we have Blu-rays to this day because there are certain things that are never going to be released on streaming services, particularly some of the special feature type stuff that we used to associate with DVDs. It's sort of become a boutique product. It's the only way to watch Grindhouse's theatrical cut. Thank God for that.
Well, what's interesting do you guys, I mean, I don't know, again, if you haven't watched a Blu-ray recently, I actually hadn't, and I watch movies all the time, but I just don't think about how I'm consuming them. I stream them. And I put in a Blu-ray the other day, and after streaming something for, you know, a year, it was
having to use a menu was hard, wasn't it?
But even streaming in HD is not the same bitrate and the same clarity and the same color. Like Blu-rays are gorgeous, and after watching HBO Now and watching Netflix and Hulu, you know, for a year, going back to watching a movie it was actually The Dark Knight. Watching The Dark Knight on Blu-ray, I'm like, wow, I need to watch some more movies on Blu-ray.
As Otacon said in Metal Gear Solid 4, Blu-ray is amazing, Snake! So we have that, too.
My goodness. On that note, we'll wrap up the history of awesome for the year 2008. We're covering every year from 1977, kicking it off with Star Wars, of course, up through whatever current year this is as you're watching it. So for much more on the history of awesome, keep it tuned right here to IGN.